Give me a little intro there, Gomer.
There's no turning back now.
Let's put on the show.
You're listening to the Station 71 podcast. My name is Mario, and this week I'm joined by my co-hosts,
Beth
and Brian.
We have a very exciting guest this week. I'm probably going to undersell this a little bit, but we have actor, puppeteer, and theme park enthusiast Fergie L. Philippe with us. Hello, Fergie. Thanks for joining us.
Hi. I don't think you could have undersold that. That's as simple as it gets with me.
I mean, I'm very excited to have you on. I know everybody else is as well. So it's going to be a fun episode. We're going to chit chat some theme parks, Muppets, and a little bit about your career. So do you want to tell us about you before we get started? Give us, I guess, your credentials, which sounds really bad to say.
Sure. I don't ever like talking about myself, but for you, I will push through. I'm Fergie L. Philippe. A lot of people ask if I'm named after either British royalty or if I'm named after the Black Eyed Peas singer, neither of which is true. It's a nickname that was given to me because nobody knew how to say my real name, which is Fergino, and that's a combination of my mother and my father's name. My dad's name is Fernando, and my mother's name is Sargine. And one day in my first acting class I ever took, the student assistant looked at it and just looked at me and said, "I'm going to call you Fergie." And it's stuck ever since. And it could have been insulting, but it was actually very helpful. Nobody forgets a 6'3" black guy named Fergie. So it's been helpful in my career and in my audition efforts. I grew up in Miami, Florida. Super exposed to the parks, obviously. But specifically, I got to the parks through Jim Henson and through the Muppets and Sesame Street and all that stuff. I was and still am a true nerd for all things Muppets and Henson. And the way I found the theme parks was Muppet Vision 3D. I had no idea I wasn't really aware of Disney World up until that point. Or in terms of, I wasn't aware of the maybe sheer size or understanding of its legacy or truly what it was until I found my way there because I was just looking for anything Muppet related. And the idea that anything Muppet related was at a theme park blew my mind. And then to think, not only is it within a theme park, it's within a theme park that is almost 40 square miles of just Disney.
That's so interesting. I feel like most people, they get into Disney first and then they branch out like
Muppets.
Yeah, Muppets or Star Wars or whatever properties Disney incorporates. But so that's funny that it's a little backwards for you.
Yeah, totally for me. I think it's funny that like Muppets and Disney in terms of like growing up in my household was like very similar in terms of like how much I was exposed to it, but I have more memories watching Muppets than I do anything Disney. And I'm just as much a fan of Disney stuff, but that didn't come really until I was like in middle school or high school.
So I guess the next question is, since you're so far into the Muppets, what is your favorite Muppets thing out there? Like, do you have a favorite movie, a Muppet show, episode, anything like that?
Oh man, there's all kinds of stuff. I mean, I was just thinking about this today. The greatest special that ever exists within the Muppets property is called the Muppet Family Christmas. And yes. It was made in the 80s. It's one of the last like true Muppet projects that Jim worked on before he passed away, other than Muppet Vision 3D. And it's the only thing that exists. Well, that's actually not true, but it's the only thing that is notable to the public where all of his most famous properties at the time are in one place speaking and singing and interacting with each other. That includes Fraggle Rock, Sesame Street, and all of the like classic Muppet characters. And that special is just so good. My favorite Muppet Show episode is the Harry Belafonte episode. And then, I mean, I'm not going to do this because I could sit here for hours about what my favorite Muppet anything is, but Muppet Family Christmas and the Harry Belafonte episode, and Muppet Treasure Island. Muppet Treasure Island of all the Muppet movies is my favorite movie, and so
yes, I told you, Mario. So, yeah. I told you it's the best one.
Muppet Treasure Island holds a very special place for a lot of us on this podcast.
Oh yes,
specifically Brian.
Yes. Oh man, Muppet Treasure Island is absolutely incredible, and it's so funny. I'm good friends with Noel McNeil, who plays Bear in the Big Blue House, and he likes Muppet Treasure Island fine, but he worked with Jim Henson and Frank Oz and all those guys, and he worked on Muppets Take Manhattan. So he's a little bit more biased towards some of the older films than some of the newer ones. But we always end up getting into it because he there's always the class of people who love Great Muppet Caper and Muppet Movie and Take Manhattan, and then there's the second generation, which is like Christmas Carol and Treasure Island and Space. And so so Treasure Island for me is top tier. Just like great jokes, great songs, great action, and of course Tim Curry. Like how do you turn down the brilliant Tim Curry and probably one of his best performances?
Oh, definitely. Well, see, now this is what led me to one of the questions that I wanted to ask you, which was, who do you think has had the best live action performance in a Muppets movie?
Oh, that's a great question. I actually wouldn't necessarily say Tim Curry. It would be between Michael Caine in Christmas Carol, because I just think he is the definition of what Ebenezer Scrooge should have been. That's just a gorgeous performance. And then probably what's his name? Oh my God, Phil Dunphy from Modern Family. Tyler.
Jesse Tyler Ferguson.
No, that's Tyler. I can't remember his last name, but he plays Phil Dunphy on Modern Family, and he's in Muppets Most Wanted. And he plays
that's right.
He plays like the French version of the FBI, and he gets paired up with Sam the Eagle, and it's one of the funniest like chemistries between a Muppet and a person I've seen in a long time. And I think it's very, very good. I think him and Ricky Gervais both were very good in that movie in terms of how they played off of the Muppets and how funny they were with each other. But if I had to pick number one, it's probably Michael Caine. Oh, and I'm a liar. You see, this is why I knew this would be bad. Okay, Michael Caine. And then Charles Grodin in Great Muppet Caper. Oh my God. Charles Grodin was so good in Great Muppet Caper that when they did the Muppets at Walt Disney World, they were like, come be in this as well. Come play another character, even though we've already seen you interact with the Muppets in a completely different setting.
See, my favorite thing about Michael Caine's performance has always been that it was like nobody told him he was doing a Muppets movie. He was playing it completely straight the whole way, and then it works so well because like you said, he really embodied Ebenezer Scrooge so well, and it's like you could have plucked him out of that and put him in just like a regular live action movie without Muppets, and it would have worked.
Oh yeah, and that's the story that is talked about. I don't know if you've heard of it. Brian Henson, the director, says that when he first hired Michael, and Michael agreed to do it, Michael called him and was like, just so you know, I'm not going to wink at the camera. I'm not going to act like there are any Muppets on set. I am going to perform Ebenezer Scrooge as if I am doing it at the Royal Shakespeare Company. Brian Henson was
he did it.
Okay, yeah, that sounds great. I mean, I think that works perfectly. It's kind of why we hired you.
Yeah, that's a staple of my like Christmas season. It's not Christmas if I haven't watched Muppets Christmas Carol at least once
Absolutely.
or twice.
I watch it every Christmas Eve at 8 p.m. That's always my tradition.
Oh,
that's a good one. We also have a question on here about who your favorite Muppet is, so we can knock these out of the way pretty quickly, I think.
That one always like goes like back and forth. When I was a kid, it was Animal. Like Animal was just something I think it was just like unintelligible energy I really understood deeply, and so I kind of just naturally gravitated towards that. But as I've gotten older, just in general, the all the characters of the Electric Mayhem are very attractive to me. But I think, you know, specifically Floyd. Floyd is just one of those characters that has like so much going for him. Like he can be really funny, he can be hysterical, but he can also have these beautifully like beautiful soul performances. And just like, you know, he's the coolest person in the room. And it's also really awesome to hear people talk about Jerry Nelson, the guy who originated the role, and how he was actually that cool in real life. And so whenever he was putting on Floyd, he was basically being himself. And the idea that there is somebody in the earth who is as cool as Floyd Pepper really, really excites me.
Yeah, that's a good pick. I like that one.
Yeah.
Before we dive into park stuff, did anybody have anything on this list of questions that we wanted to run down?
Well, as admittedly not like I'm not okay, so I have to be open and honest here. I love Muppets, but I'm not nearly as big of a fan as all of you guys are. So I feel like the real reason I was excited to talk to you was your Broadway connection. And
sure, yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about like how did you get into that? Was it puppetry that drew you towards the theater, or did you want to be an actor and puppetry kind of fell into line? Like, how did that come about?
It's actually the first thing you said. I started with puppetry. Like I really like when I was a kid and people asked me what my dream job was, is I was going to be a Muppet performer. Like that's what I really wanted to do. But at the time there weren't like, in my to my knowledge, there were not any resources that I was able to find that could help me access a pipeline to how I could become a Muppet performer. And so I was like, I'll just do something easier, like be an actor. And so I just started taking acting classes when I was younger. You know, Miami is actually a very vibrant community for theater and even film and TV. And so I just started taking classes when I was younger, and that kind of just, you know, that accelerated in a way that I truly wasn't expecting. And I ended up going to performing arts high school and then going to college for it. And I was lucky that when I got out of school, I ended up going to, I booked the tour of Hamilton, and I toured for a good long while. And now I'm with the Broadway company. But you know, puppetry is one of those things that's like always been like, oh, that's my true passion. But acting has kind of been like the job in a lot of ways. And I love
kind
acting.
Of the means to the end.
Yeah, which I think is so interesting because like that is not how a lot of people view acting at all, and it's definitely not how it was pitched to me. Because you know, as everybody knows, you know, trying to make a living in something like acting is so difficult. But for me, I've loved being able to act and kind of go through that path as well. But it is interesting that like acting feels like one of the like pillars of all the things that I want to do. And in a way it does kind of feel like a means to an end, because I'm also a writer, I'm a director, and you know, not just, you know, with puppets and stuff like that. Like I kind of want to do a million different things. And so acting, you know, within all the stuff I want to do feels like the easiest one to click off the list.
Gotcha.
I guess that brings a good question. Like, if you were to find a way into like puppetry as a career, what would you ultimately want to do with that? Like, would you want to work on like the Muppets or Sesame Street or something along those lines, or?
Yeah, that's a great question, because that's basically the question I asked myself when the pandemic first hit. You know, very, very happy, open advocate for therapy. And when I was in therapy, I was saying how it was really insane because the pandemic was the first time in years that I was not working on a theater piece. I was pretty nonstop with working, or at least, you know, I was either in school, I was working, and then when I got out of school, I didn't stop working, which I'm very lucky to be able to say that. But it was also like, wow, this is the first like long period of time that when somebody says, who are you? What do you do? I can't say, oh, I'm doing blah, blah, blah right now, because I'm doing nothing. And so it really made me kind of question like my values, and made me question like what do I actually live for, or what are the things that I want to be doing? And it kind of made me realize like, what are the things that maybe I didn't get a chance to pursue, or I didn't get a chance to really like invest in. And some of that was writing, and a big part of that was puppetry. And so for me, it was just like, okay, like I'm going to just like scour all the parts of the internet and find as many puppeteers as I know, both the ones that I grew up with knowing and the ones and some new ones I don't know, and just trying to get to know as many of them as I can. And so I'm kind of on that journey right now where, I'm very self-taught. Everything about Muppets is monitor technique. I don't know how much you guys know about that, but it's a very crazy, complicated system that involves watching your own performance. So I spent the whole pandemic teaching myself that. And then just reaching out to different people and making demo tapes and being like, hey, like I'm working on this right now. Don't know if there's ever a workshop or if there's ever auditions or, things like that. And I've gotten some pretty good responses. And so nothing substantial has happened yet. I've gotten to work on a couple of cool projects, but I have been in contact with a lot of people that I've looked up to my whole life, and also people that are kind of in the same place as me and are hoping to maybe make some original stuff with me. And so that's kind of moving in a very exciting direction. And I don't know where, and that one is fun because like, I feel like I said, acting is the means to an end. Acting is my career right now and is my job. That like puppetry now is this thing where it's like, I'll go wherever it takes me. I don't necessarily have this specific goal in mind with it. I'm not like, I need to do this. I need to do it this way. I think it's more like wherever I am told or wherever the universe decides to take me in the world of puppetry, I will follow it, because that is truly such a pure love of mine that it's exciting that I'm not looking at it as potentially being a thing that I depend on for, stability.
That's awesome. I'm very excited to see where that takes you too, because I feel like when I was younger, I very much enjoyed the Muppets. Like that was a thing that I absolutely loved. And kind of like you, I remember when I was younger, I thought like, oh, this is what I would love to do. But like never even, once I started to grow up, never really pursued that. And it's kind of nice to hear somebody following their dream and looking towards like doing creative projects like that. That's really cool.
Thanks. Yeah, hopefully. I mean, I can only hope that I'll keep meeting like-minded people, and I've been very lucky that I have. And hilariously, like through the theme parks, like I know many of the puppeteers that work there because when we were on tour with Hamilton, we stopped in Orlando for a few weeks, and we kind of like made it known, like, hey, like a few of us, we were like, we're all big Disney theme park people. Like let's hang out, or let's meet up, or if you're coming to the show, let us know. And I personally got to know a lot of Parks Puppeteer people, which has been really, really great. And that's been this kind of interesting connection of like people who also kind of grew up like me, but they straight went for it. You know what I mean? Like they straight up just went to go through the puppetry and stuff like that. So it's been nice to meet like-minded people who are a little bit ahead of me, people who are in the same place as me, people who are years ahead of me. And so to get to meet the spectrum of all those people has been really helpful too.
It's awesome.
Yeah, definitely.
So I have a theme park question for you. I know you said that you kind of discovered the parks through the Muppets and Muppet Vision 3D, but do you remember what your first trip to the parks was, and kind of like what made you actually start to fall in love with them? Was it the Muppets, or was there something else there too for you?
I do remember my first trip pretty vividly. I was 4. It was July 3rd or July 4th. I think it was July 3rd. I was 4 years old, and I remember driving past the initial sign and understanding, like, I think that's the funny thing about something like Disney World is that like the brand is so recognizable that when I passed the sign that said Walt Disney World, I didn't understand the concept of what it was, but I knew where I was going. And I think that is such a fascinating thing. And that trip definitely like made me fall in love with the characters and stuff even more. But I would say that the funny thing is between that and the next trip I went on to Disney World, there's like a 7 or 8 year gap. So that trip that I went for a day. I went to Magic Kingdom. All I did was say hi to characters, and then I think I did the Buzz Lightyear ride, and then I went home. And
wow.
And for the next like 7-8 years, I was kind of like, man, it'd be fun to go do that again. And I was always taking road trips, and I would, go to these little rest stops that had all the maps to all the different parks, like Universal and SeaWorld and all that stuff. And when I found the map for Disney World, that's when I noticed, like, oh, there's A, more than one park. B, one of the parks has a freaking Muppet attraction. And that was the thing that like made me go, this might be a fascinating place. That kind of made me like really key into it. But I think what made my brain, and I was only like, I don't know, like 10, so I didn't know anything about the Disney Muppets merger or anything like that. I didn't know that Jim and Eisner were talking about potentially merging the company. I knew nothing of that. And so the only thing in my mind was, why are the Muppets at Disney World? Like, I don't understand how those two ideas connect. And so then the rest of the trip, when I was looking at this map, I was like, I wonder what other things that aren't necessarily Disney are also in these parks. Oh my God, Indiana Jones. Oh my God, Star Wars. Oh my God. Like, and I started kind of like really trying to gather this idea of like all of these different movies or all of these different things that I've watched are in this one place. What's the purpose of that? What does it benefit? And I became a lot more interested in like the architecture and the layout of the parks instead of the actual experience of going to the parks themselves. And so I always found that to be really interesting. And it wasn't until I was in college that I ever went to any of the other parks, that I went to like Epcot or Hollywood Studios or, anything like that. And so, that's not true. That's not true. Cause I definitely forced my parents to take me to MGM so that I could go see Muppet Vision, for one of my birthdays when I was in like middle school. But the access point into the parks, and it still is what fascinates me the most, is understanding the layout of how the parks work and how there are so many different ideas that exist in one place. That is the thing that always kind of breaks my mind about it.
Yeah. So, I mean, with the Muppets connection, would you say that Hollywood Studios now is your favorite park, or does it vary?
It varies. It does vary all the time because, like, that section of the park, people are going to hate me, but I'm like counting down the days to when they decide they're going to demolish it. Like, I feel like it's such a forgotten part of that park. And there used to be so many more things, even down to the fountain. There used to be all of the different characters within the fountain. Mm-hmm. And one by one, all of those characters got taken away. And now it's just Piggy and a bunch of rats. Even the store that had Muppets merchandise is like shut down. I was just there last week, and like there was nothing. That store has been shut down for the past like 2-3 years. And Pizza Rizzo is one of the most disgusting places you can eat. Like there's nothing. There's such little. I feel like there isn't really any like attention given to that section of the park, and I don't envision Disney imagining the Muppets are a financial commodity enough to like keep the thing that separates Star Tours and Galaxy's Edge from staying there. But it varies all the time. The last time, I think as I've gotten older, like I think it's Epcot. Epcot's the one that still piques my interest, especially because I think it's like such a work in progress right now to figure out like what is Future World? What does it want to be? Like, what are these new attractions that are coming in? I think it's just Spaceship Earth. That is the only thing that's been there. I don't even think was Spaceship Earth there opening day? I cannot remember. I think it was. Yeah. And like I think that's one of the only opening day attractions from Epcot, and all of the rides that come in. I'm like, is it really Future World or is it just like existing? Like,
Yeah.
And so I'm endlessly captivated by Epcot, but for the same reason, that's why Hollywood Studios is also up there with one of my favorites, because it's like, oh, well then, is Hollywood Studios still a park about the movies, or is it like, is it basically the Florida version of California Adventure? Like, what is this park? Like, what are we doing here?
We've been trying to figure
which
that
is
out
why I
for
love
some
going back
time.
there.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think
Yeah.
it's so weird, especially like when you have something like, you know, people get really upset with me, but I think Runaway Railway is fine. But it was one of those things that when I was writing it, I was like, there's no theme to this ride that matches the rest of the park. I don't understand why this ride is here. This could have been a Magic Kingdom ride. You know what I mean? I was like, there's nothing about this that gives it a unique sense that it's related to Hollywood Studios, other than the fact that we were watching a short and now we're in the short.
I feel like that was definitely worse during the pandemic when it was like there was no show.
Exactly.
I still haven't seen the pre-show.
It's fun. It's like a fun ride, but I think it's also like when I think about, and I probably sound like such one of like those, like, you know, I miss it back in the days, but it, you know, I think Great Movie Ride was so awesome because there were so many little elements of like the people who were driving the carts, and obviously the different sets and stuff, but there was such an homage to old Hollywood. Like, it wasn't even just about making movies. It was about the time period with which Walt grew up, or Walt started making movies in Hollywood. And I think that idea was so specific that the moment that MGM stopped their licensing deal, they kind of just gave up on the concept. It was like, well, you know what? Now that MGM's not in it, I guess we don't really have to care anymore. Let's just put a Toy Story Land here. You know what I mean? And not that, and again, like, I love that park. Like, there are really a lot of fun things happening over there, but like, there's nothing consistent about that park.
Yeah, you're definitely in good company with us because we say stuff like this all the time about Hollywood Studios has just kind of lost its identity and doesn't really know who it is right now, or maybe for the foreseeable future. They keep adding all of this, I don't know, like piecemeal stuff that doesn't really fit and trying to make it fit.
Well, I'd say they should just call it an adventure. Just call it Disney Florida Adventure and call it a day. Like, you know, because then it puts a blanket thing over it. You can have this like little section for movies and stuff, which is like, I don't even know what to frickin' call it. But, you know, it's just one of those things where even Disney California Adventure makes a little bit more sense, just because it's like the theme is California, and California can mean a million different things. And it was like one of the things that like got them roasted the most when they first opened, but it's also the thing that's like saved them, because, you know, even Cars Land, it's like Radiator Springs looks exactly like something, you know, near Yosemite. Like, that absolutely is like something you can totally have. Or if it's on the desert path on the way to Vegas, like, you can totally justify having some of these different things in California Adventure. But with Hollywood Studios, it's more just like, well, we can just put this here. I guess this works. It's like, how does Galaxy's Edge fit into Hollywood Studios? You know what I mean? And right. I feel like the issue is that there is too much of a change that would require to happen in terms of the concept of the park itself. That would cost too much money. Yeah, that does not want to be spent.
Right, because it'd have to flip either half of the park that's still old Hollywood to these like immersive lands, or just cut out the immersive lands that they just put in. So right, exactly.
Yeah, it is unfortunate. It kind of feels like, you know, as with a lot of companies, it's just like, what's going to get people in the door? We don't really care if it blends in seamlessly or not.
Yeah, that's how I feel about Kite Tails. I'm like, what's gonna distract people from like walking around the park? Well, just put a bunch of inflatable, somewhat look-alike characters in the air, and I'm sure people will sit and watch.
Right.
So one of the things that I pitched to you when I had asked you to come on was we wanted to talk about Muppets in the park, and just like what they could potentially do to be better, because we've talked a couple times about like what was supposed to be there, what didn't happen, like having a great movie ride with the Muppets. Like that idea is such it fits so well.
It's so smart.
And I feel like that would have been like the key piece to tying it all together and maybe making it a mainstay. But for you, what would it need to be for the Muppets to come back to the parks or to work in the theme park setting, you think?
I think the thing that Disney does not want to take advantage of with the Muppets is that like the Muppets are really good at being omniscient. Like they do not have to be the main event. They could really use these characters to their advantage to provide commentary, as opposed to, I think one of the funniest concepts they ever came up with was that when they were originally going to do the deal with Disney and the Muppets for Disneyland for 1 year, it was supposed to be that Mickey and Minnie and all of the VIP characters were going to go on vacation, and the Muppets were going to take over Disneyland. And but it was going to be a mess. Like it was going to be absolutely terrible. Like the Matterhorn was just going to be infested with rats, and like, you know, the submarine voyage was going to have like Piggy trying to do a number in the middle of it. Like it was all of these like insane ideas that the idea wasn't, let's give them a parade, let's give them a show. It was, no, let's put the Muppets in this very controlled environment and let them do what the Muppets do, which is ruin everything. Like they can't really provide something substantial unless it's the Muppet Show, in my opinion. And so I think that what is hurting them right now is that they've had all of these like couple of things that have kind of been a decent idea, but they've never followed through with it. They used to have this Beaker Bunsen like mobile thing that would drive around and talk to guests. Like that's actually very smart. I don't know what's stopping them from having a walk around Sweetums in the park, doing that exact same thing. Having an Electric Mayhem show where it's like a 15-minute thing where you just watch the Electric Mayhem perform terrible covers of Disney songs. Like there are so many like different things that I feel like they could be taking advantage of that don't involve necessarily giving them their own. And all of those different little things can drive them to the Muppets courtyard. And if you're providing, you know, more meet and greets, or you actually open up that damn store, or, you know what I mean, you replace Pizza Rizzo with something more sustainable to eat, you know, if you find like different things that I mean, I don't, you know, run the finances over at Disney, so you can only quote me so hard. But like, if you don't, there doesn't have to be giant financial investments in these different things. Like, it can be very much like, hey, like, you know, let's do these little pop-up experiences. Let's have the Muppets show up in these different places, because that's kind of what the Muppets are. I think that's what improves the appearances of them.
Right, and you know, I think one of the best examples of that was them doing Great Moments in History.
Oh my God, it was fantastic.
It's a pop-up show, you know, that you, like you were saying, you can throw them in pretty much anywhere. It came out, it seemed to receive really, really good praise. Then they took it away and just kind of said, okay, you know, it's like, it was good, but we're done with it, you know? So it seems like they do that. They find these things with the Muppets that are successful, but then they don't continue them or find a new replacement for them or anything. They just say it's gone.
Yeah. They had this thing in Disneyland that was like a Christmas Carol bus where there was different Muppet characters, and the bus would drive around the park and sing different Christmas carols. And it's like, that's exactly it. That's enough. That is like a perfect thing to have, is to have these characters come up, because that's all people really want to do. They just want to interact with the Muppets. They just want to see the Muppets live in front of them. Like that is truly enough for these things. And I think a lot of Muppet fans would be angry at me for being like, they don't need to do more than that. But I actually don't think they do need to do more than that, because I think that while Disney owns them now, I don't necessarily think that means that their presence in the park has to increase tenfold. I just think that if there is an appearance increase over at the parks, there has to be a lot more thought put into it. And it has to be in a function that's going to make sense. Like, you're not just going to throw the Star Wars characters into Frontierland. Like you say, okay, we need to have a section for them. We need to make sure that we have this whole thing for them. Because for the Star Wars characters, that is actually what makes sense. But for something like the Muppets, you can actually have them break the fourth wall. You can have them appear in different places and provide commentary or make fun of things or something like that. It's also the thing that I've been saying about when they try to do these new movies. I'm like, guys, the new movies don't work because you're trying to put an idea of who the Muppets are on something. They're not these cute, cuddly creatures. They are crazy, insane people who are untalented. Like, that is what makes the Muppets so great. And so what you should do is do it again. Put them in a situation. And that's why Muppets Haunted Mansion works so well. Because it's like, put them in an adaptation again. That's how you reintroduce these characters to the audience again. You put them in an adaptation of a property that's already familiar. You let them get to know these characters, and then you can start working on original content with them. But when you take them away for so long, like they kind of have been, recently, I think recently now they're starting to move in a different direction. They have new management over at the studio side, but I think it's getting to a point where the executives, I think, have an idea of what the Muppets are, and it's not who they are really. It's not these cute, cuddly creatures. It's these very dysfunctional animals, very dysfunctional and like emotionally like not present and very like socially inappropriate groups of people. And it's why we like them. It's because they're not really good at being socially in order.
Yeah, that's very true.
Yeah, definitely. My favorite Muppet contents is always if they're satirizing something. I think that's been
best, it's just brilliant,
right? Which also brought me to a question that I wanted to ask you, which somebody who's obviously very knowledgeable about both the Muppets and Broadway. What is the ultimate crossover? What is the one Broadway show that would be best adapted into a Muppets movie?
Oh, into a Muppets movie?
Yes.
Les Mis.
Okay.
It's either Les Mis or it's Phantom. I think with those two properties, like if you, because I also think I've had this discussion with my friend James many, many a time. If you're doing a Muppet movie where they're putting on a show, it also has to be the backstage life. And the show has to be able to have so much in it going on that the backstage life makes it doubly as funny. So with something like Les Mis, it's like, who are all the ABC students going to be? It's all the rats. It's the rats and the chickens. Okay, great. All the rats and the chickens are on stage. Piggy is fighting over whether she's Fontaine or whether she's Eponine or whether she's Cosette or, all of that different stuff going on. Gonzo's playing Javert. Oh, who's the one human in the show? I think it should be the bishop, and I think it should be Christoph Waltz.
Okay, I like that.
It should just be like a cameo part. But I think it's one of those things that like it has to be like a huge production that I almost feel like it's better if it's a drama, because it's like they're trying so hard to put on this like really beautiful show, but it doesn't work because they're the Muppets and they can't do anything serious. And it just turns to complete chaos in every single number.
I would love to watch this.
See, because I hadn't even thought about like pulling it back like a wall further and then putting on a stage production. But I love that.
That's always, because I think that's what makes the function of the Muppet Show itself so smart, is that like the show itself is really bad. The show is terrible. What makes the show good is all the backstage antics that lead them to going on stage and putting on a bad show. And I think again, that's where a lot of people don't, especially the executives, like they're not understanding like how that function of the Muppets work. Like it's not about the fact that the Muppets are performers. It's about the fact that the Muppets are bad performers. That is the emphasis, and that needs to kind of be the focus. Fozzie doesn't work if Fozzie's a good comedian. Fozzie only works because he really sucks at telling jokes. Gonzo's only working because he's the worst stunt artist that's ever existed. Piggy works because she's the worst singer and dancer that's ever existed. Like none of these people are the only way that kind of works is the Electric Mayhem. And even that depends on what you ask them to play. there's always kind of a catch with a lot of the characters, and so I think that's what makes the situation of making them put on a show so funny. I mean, I've had dreams of writing a Muppet Hamilton crossover, because that would just be hysterical. Of like trying to watch the Muppets put that on, or try to have them do hip hop like that. That's so funny to me.
So what's your casting for the Muppets Hamilton crossover?
Oh God. Well, Kermit's obviously a Ham. Gonzo is Burr. Sweetums is Mulligan in the first act, but then he rips through Madison's clothing, so then he can't do it anymore. So then Fozzie takes over as Madison. Piggy starts Act 1 as Angelica, but then in Act 2 becomes Eliza because she gets to kiss Kermit more.
That is genius. Oh.
Mariah Reynolds is Camilla the chicken.
Yes.
And then because that becomes Kermit and Camilla kissing, Gonzo gets actually mad at Kermit, so then he goes to Bunsen and is like, I need a real gun. And Bunsen makes obviously the worst gun that's ever existed, and it backfires on Gonzo. So and I think oh my God, what else was I saying? Floyd is John Lawrence in the first act, but then he doesn't like the idea of him dying, so then Robin becomes Hamilton's son in the second act. And I think that's what also works, is that like in this show, because everyone's double cast, all of the Muppets hate the idea of double casting, so they all play there's no double casting. Everyone has to play one character.
That is so great.
It's such a good thought on the idea of them too.
You really thought that one through.
I thought about that. I've been thinking about that for months. Like that's one that I really have to genuinely sit down and like write out one day, because I think that would just be so funny.
Yeah,
absolutely.
You've got to carry that one through. I guess Muppets question about like general stuff that Disney's done with them. How did you feel about Muppets Haunted Mansion as a Muppets fan and a Parks fan? Because that's one that Brian and I have gone back and forth on, like absolutely gushing about. So feel free to tell us you hate it, because
No, I actually thought it was genius. I mean, the moment they announced they were doing it, I was like, there's no way this can fail. It's that whole thing again where I was like, if the Muppets are going to satirize something or parody something, it's going to work. Just because I think that's what they do best right now, as they're still trying to like find their voice. Because I think that's also kind of been the difficult thing, is that like not necessarily since Jim has died, but I think since the Muppets have kind of been passed around from company to company, there hasn't been a sense of strong stability. And Haunted Mansion, I feel like really set a specific tone for what this new generation of Muppets could and should be.
Mm-hmm.
And I really, really enjoyed it. And I thought the cameos were hilarious and the guest stars were great. Will Arnett is another one. I mean, what a great person to have play off the Muppets. And it was so well done, I thought. And there were also like really great. I think the thing that I was worried about was that I was like, oh, this is just going to be for Muppet fans. But there were so many great Haunted Mansion jokes in there. There were so many great, for people who are like big fans of the parks, there were so many little tidbits in there for them as well. So I loved it. I've watched it 100 times. It's my new Halloween tradition. I absolutely adore it.
That's good to hear. That is it. When that came out, I know Brian and I were both like, oh, this is one of those things that we have to approach with cautious optimism. And then I think we gushed about it for weeks, right?
Yes,
totally.
I was so nervous about watching it. But yeah, very, very delighted in how it turned out.
I understand. But I loved it as well.
I was just going to say, I feel like that would be, as far as parks go, a pretty easy overlay tie-in.
That's what I was
Muppets
thinking
Haunted
too.
Mansion. It's
And
not
I
like
feel
as
like that would work
intensive
in
as
Florida.
Haunted Mansion Holiday, so maybe they
Right.
would actually give it a shot.
Oh, I guess that's right. Nightmare Before Christmas is their Christmas overlay. It's not their Halloween overlay. So
Well, it's
yeah,
both,
I
I
feel
think,
like that
but
should
yeah.
work too. Oh, is it both?
Yeah, I think they do it for both.
Yeah, I think that would work. And honestly, like, I honestly hope it's not the end. Like, I hope the next one is like Muppets Big Thunder Mountain Railroad or something crazy like that, where they're trying to do like prospector stuff. Like, I feel like that could be like a really hilarious trend of having the Muppets try to do all of the different rides and stuff within the parks. Because again, I'm like, that provides great stuff for you to throw into the parks and great presents. And again, it doesn't necessarily make the Muppets the main event. Because I think that's also the weird thing, is that like there's like this weird rivalry of like the Muppets and then Mickey and his characters. And I'm like, that's simply not the case. Like the Muppets are their very own specific thing, and they are not there to like share the spotlight with Mickey and the gang. Like, they absolutely can be in the background and be commentary.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, I have kind of a serious question to ask.
Oh, no?
Yeah.
You know, there's been a lot of talk lately with, you know, banning certain media or taking things out of movies. We saw when, you know, Disney Plus edited out certain parts of Splash because they thought it was inappropriate. We see stuff about banned books coming up. And generally, I believe that media should be consumed kind of in its original form, or it shouldn't be put out there. But where I stray from that is Muppet Feet. And I wanted to know what your thoughts on Muppet Feet are, because
on Muppet Feet?
Muppet Feet, I think they need to be retroactively edited out of all of the Muppet media. we somehow, every time we discuss Muppets on this show, we bring up the uncanny valley aspect of every time Muppet feet are displayed. They just do not look right. And I wanted to get another hardcore Muppet fans opinion on this.
I don't disagree with you. I think Muppet feet are incredibly disconcerting. However, the only unfortunate thing is that Jim Henson and the Muppet Builders do not necessarily like making Muppets without feet, because it was helpful for them in performance to help them establish like a kind of ground when they would help them walk. So I'm all about it. I think the performers would uprise and try to kill us all if we ever tried to make that happen.
So they can stay for the production value, but
the feet serve a purpose.
For the sake of performance.
You know what?
Wow.
For the sake of performance, they can stay.
I'm fine with them being there. I just don't want to see them.
You just simply don't want to be exposed to it. I hear you. Okay. I can get
the unfortunate thing about that is the Muppet show's icon on Disney Plus is Muppet Feet.
So. It's literal Muppet feet. It's a terrible, like, OnlyFans teaser for Muppets.
Oh
gosh.
Well, Beth, did you have anything you wanted to follow up with that question on, or should we let Fergie plug his stuff?
I guess this is probably a good one to end it on. What advice would you give to anybody who is aspiring to achieve things that you have, whether it be actor, writer, puppeteer, director? What kind of advice do you give, or do you hate this question?
I don't hate this question. I think it's more that I'm always asking people that question because I still don't feel like I've gotten to do really amazing things, and I've been very grateful. But I still feel on the up and up. I still feel like I'm, moving forward, and that I'm a beginner in a lot of ways. And I think that's the thing that I encourage people, is to always feel like a beginner, to like make yourself open to all ideas, and don't necessarily become
too big for your britches.
Don't become somebody who thinks they figured it all out. Like, stay open and stay humble and stay with the idea that you have a lot of things to learn, because it's the thing that's going to separate you from others. I think people see that I'm really excited to learn, and that I'm really excited to kind of figure things out. And I think it's why I get hired, and it's why people want to work with me. So that's kind of the biggest thing I always encourage.
Awesome. I think that's great advice.
Nice.
So before we let you go, I guess tell our listeners where they can find you. I guess social medias. I know you did a Muppets show watch along podcast during the pandemic. If you want to plug that,
and that is coming back. I've been saying that for like 2 years, but it's coming back. I'm actually having a meeting about it tomorrow. But the Muppet Show, it's Time to Meet the Muppets was the show that I was doing. It was a watch along podcast. It's a lot of fun. I only got about 6 episodes in, and then we got news that we were going back to Broadway for Ham, and that ended up kind of taking up a bit of a priority. So I put it to bed for a little bit, but now that I feel like after a year and a half, my life is kind of finally slowed down, I can kind of get back to it. So that's going to be coming back soon. Other than that, keep tracking me on Twitter, keep tracking me on Instagram. I'm always ranting about Muppets and Disney related stuff. And yeah.
Nice.
Awesome.
Well, thank you for jumping on with us. This was
definitely.
It was a fun one.
Absolutely, for having me, and I'd love to come back.
Please stand clear of the doors. Por favor, manténganse alejado de las puertas.